The red emergency lights flashed across the Galactic Council chambers as beings from 100 worlds watched their screens in silence. The massive hall that usually echoed with debates and arguments now held only the sound of breathing and the hum of translation devices. Every eye was fixed on the holographic display, showing a human ship burning in the darkness of space. Commander Jake Morrison stood alone on the bridge of the UE's Guardian. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his left eye, and his uniform was torn in 3 places. Behind him, the bridge was a mess of sparks and broken glass. His crew was gone. The ship was dying. But Jake Morrison was still fighting. Amy Rodriguez sat in the common room at the Terran Naval Academy on Luna Base with 50 other cadets. She watched the screen with wide eyes as Morrison limped from one control panel to another. The other cadets were crying or holding each other, but Amy just stared. Something felt wrong, but she could not say what. On the screen, Morrison pressed buttons with hands that shook from exhaustion. The void swarm ships moved closer to his position, like hungry sharks. These alien creatures had already eaten 3 star systems and turned them into empty space. They did not talk or make deals. They just consumed everything in their path. The Guardian was the last ship between the swarm and the civilian evacuation fleet. 10,000 families were running for their lives in ships that could barely fight back. Morrison had stayed behind. To buy them time, even though everyone knew it, meant death. Ambassador Kethvur of the Zephyrian Empire leaned forward in his seat at the Galactic Council. His scaled face showed interest rather than concern. He whispered something to his aide about human weakness and the need for stronger leadership in this sector of space. Back on Luna Base, Amy felt her hands getting cold as she watched Morrison work. She knew that bridge layout somehow. She had never been on a Guardian-class ship, but she knew where every button was. She could see in her mind where the emergency power controls were located and which corridor led to the engine room. Morrison activated the ship communication system with his right hand while his left hand moved switches that would overload the reactor. His voice came through speakers across the galaxy, clear and strong despite his wounds. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earth Ship Guardian to all human forces and allied worlds," he said. "The swarm advance has been stopped here for now, but they will regroup and come again. Do not let them reach the core worlds. Do not let them win." Amy felt tears on her cheeks, but she did not remember starting to cry. She wiped them away with the back of her hand and kept watching. Morrison continued his message as swarm ships fired energy beams that shook his dying vessel. "To the families we saved today, and to those who will carry on the fight, I want you to remember something important. Humanity does not surrender. We do not bow down. We do not give up hope, even when everything looks impossible." The other cadets in the room were sobbing now, but Amy heard every word like Morrison was speaking directly to her. She felt like she was standing right next to him on that bridge. She could smell the smoke and feel the heat from the damaged systems. Morrison moved to the main control chair and sat down heavily. His breathing was getting harder, and Amy somehow knew his ribs were broken on the left side. How did she know that? She had never met Morrison or served with him. "The evacuation fleet has reached safe distance," Morrison said into his communication device. "Guardian will now engage primary targets. All stations, this is our final transmission." Amy stood up from her chair without meaning to. The other cadets looked at her with confusion, but she did not notice them. Her eyes stayed on the screen where Morrison was preparing to ram his ship into the largest swarm vessel. Morrison looked directly into the camera, and Amy felt like he was looking right at her. "Tell them," he said with his last breath of strength. "Tell them humanity does not give up, ever." The Guardian accelerated toward the swarm command ship with its reactor about to explode. Morrison held the controls steady as energy weapons tore holes in his hull. At the last second before impact, Amy saw him smile. The explosion lit up space for 1,000 kilometers in every direction. The swarm command ship broke apart, and its smaller vessels scattered in confusion. The threat was stopped for now, but the cost was clear. Jake Morrison was gone. Amy sat back down as the transmission ended, and the room fell quiet. The other cadets talked in whispers about Morrison being a hero and how he saved all those people. They were right, but that was not what bothered Amy. She bothered her was that she remembered being on that bridge. She remembered Morrison's thoughts and feelings as he made his final choice. She remembered the pain in his chest and the way his hands felt on the controls. Most of all, she remembered his determination to protect others, no matter what it cost him. Amy looked around the room at her fellow cadets, who were still crying and hugging each other. None of them seemed to be experiencing what she was feeling. They saw Morrison as a brave man who died far away. But Amy felt like she had been there with him. She got up and walked out of the common room toward her quarters. She needed to think about what was happening to her and why she had memories that should not exist. Behind her, the other cadets kept talking about the hero who had saved them all. They did not know that somehow Amy Rodriguez had died with him on that burning bridge. Amy Rodriguez could not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the bridge of the Guardian and felt Jake Morrison's memories flowing through her mind like they were her own experiences. She knew things she should not know, and remembered places she had never been. At 06:00 hours, she gave up trying to rest and walked to the instructor offices. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Hayes was already at his desk, drinking coffee and reading reports from the outer colonies. He looked up when Amy knocked on his doorframe. "Rodriguez, what brings you here so early?" Hayes asked. He was a good instructor who cared about his cadets, but he looked tired from staying up late watching news reports about the swarm attack. Amy sat down in the chair across from his desk and tried to find words for something that sounded impossible. "Sir, I need to report something strange about yesterday's broadcast. I think I have information about Commander Morrison that I should not have." Hayes put down his coffee cup and gave Amy his full attention. "What kind of information, Cadet?" "I remember being on the Guardian during the battle, sir. Not as myself, but as Morrison. I can recall details about the ship and the mission that were not in any public reports." Hayes leaned back in his chair and studied Amy's face. She was one of his best students, and not the type to make up stories or seek attention. But what she was saying made no sense. "Amy, you watched a traumatic event yesterday. Sometimes our minds create false memories to help us process difficult emotions. This is a normal response to witnessing something like Morrison's sacrifice." Amy shook her head. "Sir, with respect, this is not trauma response. I know specific details about the Guardian's bridge layout and Morrison's personal background. I can tell you his sister's middle name is Catherine, and he had a dog named Rusty when he was 12 years old." Hayes frowned. Those details were not in Morrison's public service record, and Amy would have no way to know them. "How could you possibly know those things?" "Because I remember them, sir. I remember Morrison's childhood and his training at the academy. I know he broke his left arm when he was 15, and that he has a scar on his right shoulder from a training accident. I remember how it felt to make the decision to ram the swarm ship." Hayes activated his computer terminal and pulled up Morrison's classified personnel file. The medical records showed a healed fracture in the left arm from age 15 and surgical repair of a shoulder injury during academy training. Information that was restricted to command-level officers. "Amy, this is impossible. These records are classified above your clearance level. How are you accessing this information?" Amy stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the lunar surface. I do not know, sir. But it gets stranger. I remember Morrison's command codes and the tactical decisions he made during previous missions. I know things about the Guardian's weapon systems that are not in any textbook. Hayes pulled up more files and asked Amy specific questions about Morrison's service history. She answered each one correctly, including details about classified operations that had never been made public. Her responses matched official reports, word for word. Sir, I think something happened during that broadcast. Something connected me to Morrison in a way that should not be possible. Hayes was about to respond when his communication device beeped with an urgent message. He read the text and his face went pale. Amy, we need to get to the main briefing room right now. You are not the only cadet reporting Morrison memories. They walked quickly through the corridors of Luna Base toward the Central Command Section. Other cadets and instructors were moving in the same direction with confused and worried expressions. The briefing room was already crowded when they arrived. Colonel Janet Murphy stood at the front of the room with a stack of reports in her hands. She was the base commander, and Amy had never seen her look so concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, we have received over 200 reports in the past 12 hours from personnel across human space. Cadets, soldiers, and civilians are all claiming to have memories of being Jake Morrison during yesterday's battle. The room erupted in surprised voices as people realized they were not alone in their strange experiences. Amy looked around and saw other cadets nodding their heads in recognition. Colonel Murphy continued, "These are not isolated cases of trauma response. The individuals reporting Morrison memories can provide classified tactical information and personal details that they should not know. Medical scans show unusual brain activity in the areas associated with memory formation." A cadet near the front raised her hand. "Ma'am, I remember everything from Morrison's perspective. The pain he felt and the thoughts he had as he made his final choice. It feels as real as my own memories." Other voices joined in sharing similar experiences. Some reported dreaming about Morrison's childhood, while others described feeling his emotions during the battle. All of them agreed that the memories felt completely authentic. Hayes leaned over to whisper to Amy, "This is beyond anything in our medical or psychological training. How can hundreds of people share identical false memories?" Amy whispered back, "What if they are not false memories, sir? What if something actually connected us to Morrison during those final moments?" Colonel Murphy held up her hand for silence. "Command has ordered a full investigation into what the media is calling the Morrison effect. Dia Lisa Park from the Consciousness Research Division will be arriving tomorrow to begin testing affected personnel." She paused and looked around the room. "Until we understand what is happening, all personnel reporting Morrison memories are restricted to base. No one talks to reporters or outside contacts about these experiences. This information is classified until further notice." Amy felt a mix of relief and worry as the briefing ended. She was glad to know she was not losing her mind, but the implications of what was happening scared her. If hundreds of humans were sharing Morrison's memories, then something fundamental had changed about how their minds worked. As she walked back to her quarters, Amy passed other cadets who were discussing their own Morrison experiences. Some described tactical knowledge they had never learned, while others talked about emotional connections to people Morrison had cared about. In her room, Amy sat on her bed and tried to make sense of what was happening. She could still feel Morrison's presence in her mind, like an echo of someone who had been incredibly brave and selfless. His sacrifice had saved thousands of lives, but somehow it had also done something else. Amy looked out her window at the stars and wondered if Jake Morrison had known that his final act would change the people he died to protect. She doubted it, but she was grateful that his courage and determination lived on in the memories he had somehow shared with them. Tomorrow, the scientists would try to explain how this was possible, but tonight, Amy just wanted to honor the man whose final thoughts had become part of her own mind. Dialisa Park arrived at Luna Base with a team of specialists and equipment that filled 3 transport ships. She was humanity's leading expert on consciousness and brain function, but even she had never seen anything like the Morrison effect. Her first task was to interview the affected individuals and try to understand what had happened to them. Amy Rodriguez sat in a medical chair with sensors attached to her head while Dr. Park ran scans of her brain activity. The readings showed patterns that should not exist in a normal human mind. Amy, I want you to think about Commander Morrison's final battle, Dr. Park said while watching the monitors. Focus on the memories you believe came from him. Amy closed her eyes and let Morrison's experiences flow through her consciousness. She could feel his determination as he prepared the Guardian for its final mission. The sensors detected unusual energy patterns in areas of her brain that normally stayed inactive. Fascinating, Dr. Park muttered as she studied the data. Your neural activity is synchronizing with quantum field fluctuations that we can barely detect. It is like your mind is accessing information stored outside your physical brain. After 3 hours of testing, Dr. Park had Amy sit in a regular chair so they could talk without the medical equipment. Amy felt tired from concentrating so hard, but she wanted to help solve this mystery. Doctor, what is happening to us? How can so many people share memories from one person? Dr. Park looked at her notes and chose her words carefully. Amy, I believe humans have a form of consciousness that is different from any other species we have encountered. Most alien races have isolated individual minds, but humans appear to have the ability to connect with each other under certain conditions. She pulled up holographic displays showing brain scans from multiple affected individuals. Look at these patterns. All of you show the same unusual activity in the same brain regions. You are not just remembering Morrison's experiences. You are somehow accessing a shared consciousness network that he activated during his final moments. Amy stared at the brain scans with growing understanding. You mean Morrison's death created some kind of mental link between humans? Not his death exactly, but his emotional state during those final moments. The combination of extreme sacrifice, heroic determination, and his final broadcast appears to have triggered a dormant ability in human consciousness. Morrison became a focal point that connected human minds across vast distances. Dr. Park showed Amy more data from tests conducted on other affected individuals. The evidence suggests that humans evolved with quantum consciousness capabilities that normally remain inactive. Morrison's sacrifice created the perfect conditions to awaken this ability in hundreds of people simultaneously. While Dr. Park continued her research on Luna Base, the political situation in the galaxy was getting worse. Ambassador HFY, the Zephyrian Empire, had called an emergency session of the Galactic Council to address what he called the human telepathy crisis. The Zephyrian delegation presented their case to representatives from dozens of worlds. HFY stood at the center of the Great Hall, with his scales gleaming under the lights as he spoke. Fellow council members, we face an unprecedented threat to galactic security. Humans have demonstrated the ability to share memories and possibly thoughts across interstellar distances. This telepathic contamination could spread to other species and destroy the privacy and individual identity that forms the foundation of civilized society. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled delegates. Many alien species valued mental privacy above almost everything else, and the idea of shared consciousness terrified them. The Altarian representative stood to speak. Ambassador HFY raises valid concerns. If humans can access each other's minds without consent, and no species that interacts with them is safe from mental intrusion. HFY nodded approvingly. I propose that all human space be placed under immediate quarantine until this telepathic plague can be contained or eliminated. The risk to galactic civilization is too great to ignore. Back on Luna Base, Amy was learning more about her new abilities through Dr. Park's tests. The scientist had discovered that Amy could not only access Morrison's memories, but also sense the thoughts and emotions of other affected humans when she concentrated. Amy tried to focus on Cadet Danny Chun in the next room. Dr. Park instructed. See if you can determine what he is thinking about. Amy closed her eyes and reached out with her mind toward Danny's location. After a few moments, she could sense his presence and feel his emotions. He was worried about his family on Mars and wondering if the Morrison effect would spread to them. He is thinking about his parents on Mars colony, Amy reported. He is scared that they might be affected by whatever is happening to us. Dyer Park checked with the medical team monitoring Danny in the adjacent room. His thoughts matched exactly what Amy had described. The implications were staggering. Amy, you have just demonstrated telepathic contact with another human being. This ability appears to be growing stronger as time passes. Over the following days, more humans reported experiencing the Morrison effect. Soldiers on distant outposts began sharing tactical knowledge instantaneously. Engineers on different planets found themselves collaborating on projects through mental connections they did not understand. The Quantum Consciousness Network was expanding. Dr. Park compiled her findings into a report that would change humanity's understanding of itself. She called the phenomenon quantum consciousness entanglement and theorized that humans had always possessed this latent ability. Throughout human history, there have been reports of telepathic experiences during times of extreme emotion or crisis. She wrote, Morrison's heroic sacrifice and galaxy-wide broadcast created the perfect storm of conditions needed to activate dormant quantum consciousness pathways in hundreds of individuals simultaneously. The report explained that human minds could connect through quantum field interactions that transcended normal space and time limitations. The connection was strongest during moments of intense emotion, especially those involving self-sacrifice or protection of others. As news of Dr. Park's discoveries spread through human space, people began to understand that they were witnessing the birth of something new. Humanity was evolving into a species with shared consciousness while maintaining individual identity and free will. Amy Rodriguez read Dr. Park's report in her quarters and felt both excitement and fear about what it meant for the future. She could sense the thoughts and emotions of dozens of other affected humans scattered across the solar system. They were all connected now in ways that previous generations could never have imagined. But Amy also sensed something else through her growing mental abilities. The Zephyrian Empire was mobilizing its fleet and moving ships toward human space. Ambassador Keth Vor had convinced enough council members to support a quarantine resolution. Amy reached out through the Quantum Consciousness Network to share this warning with other connected humans. The message spread instantly from mind to mind across human space. For the first time in their history, humans could communicate as a truly unified species. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had always been their willingness to sacrifice for each other. Now that strength was becoming literal through quantum consciousness connections that made every human part of a larger whole. Jake Morrison had died alone on his bridge, but his final act had ensured that no human would ever be truly alone again. Amy Rodriguez stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching displays that showed Zephyrian warships moving through hyperspace toward Earth. The Quantum Consciousness Network had grown stronger over the past week and now connected nearly 1,000 humans across the galaxy. Through this mental link, Amy could sense the thoughts and emotions of everyone in the network, including their growing fear about the approaching alien fleet. Captain Danny Stewart of the UEC Defiance sent a mental message through the network from his patrol position near Jupiter. Amy received his thoughts as clearly as if he were standing next to her. The Zephyrian advance fleet would reach Earth's outer system in less than 6 hours. Colonel Murphy activated the base communication system to address all personnel. The Galactic Council has voted to implement a complete quarantine of human space. Any attempt to leave designated boundaries will be met with military force. We are effectively prisoners in our own star system. Amy felt anger and frustration flowing through the consciousness network from humans throughout the solar system. Many wanted to fight immediately, but Amy sensed something different through her connection to Morrison's memories. Sometimes the best strategy was to let your enemy underestimate you. Dr. Park joined Amy at the tactical display and pointed to the approaching Zephyrian formations. Their fleet is designed to fight conventional human forces that communicate through radio and computer networks. They have no experience facing an enemy with instantaneous thought sharing. Amy nodded and reached out through the network to Captain Stewart on the Defiance. Without speaking aloud, she shared tactical information about Zephyrian ship weaknesses that she had learned from Morrison's memories. Stewart received the data instantly and began repositioning his vessel accordingly. Engineer Maria Santos was working on weapon modifications at the Mars orbital station when she felt Amy's presence in her mind. Through the consciousness network, Amy showed Maria exactly which systems needed upgrading to penetrate Zephyrian shields. Maria understood immediately and began implementing the changes while sharing the technical specifications with other engineers throughout the network. The Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system in perfect formation. Admiral Vex Collar commanded the operation from his flagship and expected to face scattered human resistance. His species had fought dozens of wars against conventional enemies and always won through superior firepower and coordination. What Admiral Vex Collar did not understand was that he was about to face something entirely new in galactic warfare. An enemy that could share thoughts instantly across millions of kilometers and coordinate perfectly without any electronic communication. Amy sat in the Luna-based command center, but her consciousness was simultaneously present with Captain Stewart on the Defiance and pilot Jenny Walsh in her fighter squadron near Europa, and Marine Commander Rick Johnson preparing to board Zephyrian vessels. Through the quantum network, she was everywhere at once. The first engagement began when Zephyrian scouts encountered Captain Stewart's patrol group. The aliens expected a standard space battle with predictable human tactics, but instead found themselves facing opponents who seemed to anticipate every move. Amy watched through Stewart's eyes as his ship dodged Zephyrian energy beams with impossible precision. At the same moment, she guided pilot Walsh through an attack run that hit exactly the right spot on an enemy cruiser. The consciousness network allowed perfect coordination between all human forces. Admiral Vex Collar studied the tactical displays on his flagship with growing confusion. Human ships were operating with efficiency levels that should be impossible. Their pilots were making maneuvers that required split-second timing, and their weapons were hitting targets with mathematical precision. Through the network, Amy could sense the alien admiral's frustration and used that information to plan the next phase of the battle. She shared strategic insights with all connected humans, while Morrison's tactical memories provided combat experience that no single human could possess. Maria Santos finished her weapon modifications on Mars and shared the technical data through the consciousness network. Within minutes, engineers on ships throughout the solar system were implementing the same upgrades. The Zephyrian advantage in shield technology was disappearing in real time. Marine Commander Rick Johnson received boarding coordinates directly from Amy's mind as his assault team prepared to capture a Zephyrian destroyer. He knew exactly where to find the ship's weak points and which corridors to avoid, because Amy was sharing Morrison's memories of similar operations. The consciousness network was proving its value in ways that Dr. Park had never imagined. Humans were not just sharing information, but actually thinking together as a collective intelligence, while maintaining their individual personalities and free will. Amy felt the network expanding as more humans were drawn into the quantum consciousness field by the intense emotions of combat. Civilians on Earth and Mars began experiencing Morrison memories and joining the mental link. Humanity was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. Admiral Vex Collar ordered his ships to fall back and regroup after losing 6 vessels in the first hour of fighting. His tactical computers could not explain how humans were coordinating so effectively without detectable communication signals. Through captured Zephyrian communication equipment, Amy learned that the alien admiral was requesting reinforcements from the main fleet. She shared this intelligence instantly with all connected humans and began planning countermeasures. Captain Stewart received Amy's strategic update and maneuvered his battle group to intercept the arriving Zephyrian reinforcements. Pilot Walsh coordinated with fighter squadrons from 3 different planets through the consciousness network to execute a complex attack pattern that would have been impossible using conventional communication. The battle continued for 8 hours as more Zephyrian ships arrived and more humans joined the quantum consciousness network. Amy found herself simultaneously experiencing the perspectives of dozens of individuals engaged in combat across the solar system. She felt the determination of Marine boarding parties cutting through alien hulls and the focus of pilots threading their fighters between enemy energy beams. She experienced the satisfaction of engineers watching their modified weapons tear through previously invincible Zephyrian shields. Most importantly, Amy felt the collective will of humanity refusing to surrender or be quarantined by species that did not understand what humans had become. The consciousness network was not just a tactical advantage, but a manifestation of humanity's greatest strength, which was their willingness to stand together against any threat. As the sun set over, Luna Base Amy remained in the command center, coordinating human forces through mental connections that spanned the entire solar system. The Zephyrian fleet was retreating toward the outer planets, but she knew they would regroup and return with greater numbers. Through the quantum consciousness network, Amy sent a message to every connected human. They had won the first battle by working together in ways that no other species could imagine. But the real test would come when the Galactic Council realized that humanity could not be quarantined or controlled by conventional means. Jake Morrison had died to protect human civilians from the Void Swarm, but his sacrifice had given humanity something far more valuable than military victory. It had awakened their true potential as a species that could transcend individual limitations through shared consciousness while never losing what made each person unique. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's evolution had only just begun. Amy Rodriguez felt the consciousness network strain under the weight of coordinating 10,000 human minds across the solar system. 3 days had passed since the first Zephyrian attack, and the alien fleet had been reinforced with ships from 12 different worlds. The battle for Earth's freedom was reaching its climax, but Amy could sense that some humans in the network were reaching their limits. Cadet Mike Chun had collapsed during a training exercise when the mental connection became too intense for his mind to handle. Dr. Park worked frantically to help affected individuals who were experiencing consciousness overload from trying to maintain connections with too many other minds simultaneously. Amy, you need to be careful about how much of the network you try to control, Dr. Park warned as she monitored Amy's brain activity. Your neural patterns show extreme stress from maintaining so many simultaneous connections. The human mind was not designed to process thousands of different perspectives at once. Amy nodded, but did not reduce her network activity. Through the quantum consciousness link, she could feel Captain Stewart preparing his battle group for the final engagement with Admiral Vex Collar's main fleet. She could also sense Engineer Maria Santos working desperately to complete modifications that would give human ships decisive advantage. The Zephyrian admiral had learned from his previous defeats and was coordinating with military commanders from other alien species. The Galactic Council had authorized the use of maximum force to contain what they saw as a telepathic threat to civilized society. Amy reached out through the consciousness network to touch the minds of humans throughout the solar system. She could feel their determination and courage, but also their exhaustion from days of constant mental connection. Some were beginning to question whether the price of their evolution was too high got through. Morrison's memories, Amy understood that every significant advancement in human capability had required sacrifice and adaptation. The quantum consciousness network was humanity's next evolutionary step, but it came with responsibilities that previous generations had never faced. The final battle began when the combined alien fleet emerged from hyperspace in formation around Earth. Admiral Vex Collar commanded over 200 warships, representing the military might of a dozen species. The aliens were determined to end the human telepathy crisis through overwhelming force. Amy sat in the Luna-based command center, but her consciousness was simultaneously present with every human involved in the defense of their homeworld. She experienced the battle through hundreds of different perspectives while maintaining her own individual identity and decision-making ability. Captain Stewart led the human fleet in an attack pattern that seemed chaotic to alien observers, but was actually perfectly coordinated through the consciousness network. Every ship knew exactly where every other vessel would be at every moment without any electronic communication. Pilot Jenny Walsh guided her fighter squadron through the alien formation while sharing targeting data instantly with weapons operators on capital ships. The quantum consciousness network allowed human forces to fight as a single organism with thousands of specialized parts. Marine Commander Rick Johnson boarded a Zephyrian cruiser with tactical intelligence provided directly from Amy's connection to Morrison's memories. He knew exactly which systems to disable and which corridors would lead his team to the enemy command center. Amy felt the network pulse with shared determination, as humans throughout the solar system contributed their skills and knowledge to the collective effort. Engineers shared technical innovations instantaneously, while doctors coordinated medical support for wounded personnel across multiple planets. But Amy also felt the price of their evolution, as individual minds struggled to maintain connection with the expanding network. Several humans had to be disconnected when their consciousness began to fragment under the strain of processing too much information simultaneously. Through the quantum consciousness link, Amy sensed that some people were losing their individual identity as they became too deeply merged with the collective. Dr. Park had warned that this was a risk of uncontrolled consciousness expansion, and Amy realized she needed to help people maintain balance between connection and individuality. Admiral Vex Collar watched his fleet suffer devastating losses as human forces demonstrated capabilities that defied all known tactical principles. His ships were being outmaneuvered by opponents who seemed to share a single mind while maintaining the creativity and unpredictability of individuals. The alien admiral requested permission to withdraw, but the Galactic Council ordered him to continue fighting until the human telepathic threat was eliminated. The council members were terrified that quantum consciousness might spread to other species and destroy the foundation of galactic civilization. Amy felt the network reaching a critical point as more humans joined the consciousness link during the intense emotions of combat. She realized that the expansion could not continue indefinitely without losing the individual identity that made humanity unique. Through Morrison's memories, Amy understood that true strength came not from losing oneself in a collective, but from choosing to work together, while maintaining personal responsibility and independence. The consciousness network was meant to enhance human cooperation, not replace human individuality. Amy made a decision that would affect the future of human evolution. She began teaching other network participants how to maintain stronger barriers between their own thoughts and the collective consciousness. The network became more structured, with individuals choosing when and how much to share, rather than being overwhelmed by constant connection. The result was a more stable and sustainable form of quantum consciousness that allowed humans to cooperate perfectly when needed while preserving the individual creativity and independence that made their species special. Captain Stewart felt the change in the network as it became more organized and efficient. His tactical coordination with other ships improved even as he maintained complete control over his own decisions and personality. The quantum consciousness had evolved from chaotic expansion into purposeful cooperation. The battle ended when Admiral Vex Collar's flagship was disabled by a coordinated attack that demonstrated the full potential of human consciousness evolution. The alien fleet retreated toward the outer system and requested terms for withdrawal from human space. Amy stood in the Luna Base Command Center as reports came in from across the solar system. The Zephyrian quarantine had failed, and the Galactic Council was being forced to recognize that humanity could not be contained by conventional military force. Through the consciousness network, Amy felt the satisfaction and relief of thousands of humans who had participated in defending their freedom. But she also felt their awareness that they had changed as a species and could never return to the isolated individual existence they had known before. Dyer Park joined Amy at the tactical display and smiled with exhaustion and pride. "You did it, Amy. You helped humanity take its next evolutionary step without losing what makes us human." Amy nodded and reached out through the network to sense the thoughts and emotions of her fellow humans. They were still individuals with unique personalities and dreams, but they were also part of something larger that gave them capabilities no single person could possess. That evening, Amy walked to the memorial section of Luna Base, where a holographic statue of Jake Morrison stood looking out at the stars. She placed her hand on the memorial plaque and spoke to the image of the man whose sacrifice had changed everything. "You said humanity does not give up," Amy told Morrison's statue. "You are right. We do not die either. We just become something more." Through the quantum consciousness network, Amy felt the presence of every human connected to Morrison's legacy. His courage and determination lived on not just in memory, but in the evolved capabilities of the species he had died to protect. The Void Swarm was still out there consuming worlds and threatening galactic civilization. But now they would face an enemy that shared the heroic spirit of humanity's greatest defenders. Jake Morrison had died alone on his bridge, but his final act had ensured that humans would never face any threat alone again. Amy looked up at the stars and felt the consciousness network connecting her to humans throughout the galaxy who were ready to carry on Morrison's mission of protecting others no matter the cost. Humanity had evolved, but their core values of courage, sacrifice, and determination remained stronger than ever. The galaxy would learn to respect what humanity had become or face the consequences of underestimating a species that could think as one while fighting as billions.